O Yahweh, open up you my lips, and let my mouth show forth your praise. Kuma, Yahweh, Wayaputso o Yaveka, Wayanusa misanecha mikaniacha. Kuma, Yahweh, Wayaputso o Yaveka, Wayanusa misanecha mikaniacha. Arise of you, O Yahweh. Let your enemies be scattered, and let those that hate thee flee from before thee. Let all of Yasharah, Yisrael, who love, worship, and praise Yahweh, give him thanks by saying Hallelujah.
Shalom, everybody, and welcome to Into All Truth. I pray the Ruach HaKodesh leads you into all truth and shows you things to come. Hallelujah. And I just pray for the forgiveness of your sins, that the seed of the word may be planted in your heart to bring forth the fruit of righteousness, and that fruit may be established in your life, that you stand on the rock that is Yahusha HaMashiach, and you are covered and protected in the Kuka of Yahuwah. And I pray that you are rooted and grounded in his love, that you can show forth his righteousness and truth. In the name of Yahushua, I pray. All right, family. So today we are going to continue from the last study on the door to Eden to discuss the location of the Garden of Eden. Somebody sent me a video about the location, which I had asked about, and I'd actually seen the video before, but it gave me some clarity. So I thought I would go into it to just discuss the matter, give you some awareness by the Ruach HaKodesh about it, hopefully. And I think that I've found some really interesting information. And so I hope it blesses you. I want to begin by just saying that the Garden of Eden is a hidden city, as we've discussed in the previous episode. Please go back and watch it on the door to Eden. Second ESDRAS says that it's a hidden city that will be revealed. So our first precept for the Garden of Eden in this study is Romans 1:20, which says, that which may be known of Aluha is clearly seen, being understood by the things that he made. And of course, all of my studies have focused on the head of Africa. And you can see in the study previous to this on the door to the Garden of Eden that Yahusha was slain from the foundation of the earth, the place of the skull, which is the continent of Africa. And so that's how we can get a sense of where the Garden of Eden is, and even within our own bodies, because the kingdom of heaven is actually within us. All right, and so this study will prove that, but we're trying to locate again the four rivers and the Garden of Eden. And we're also going to go into the reality that Eden actually covered the whole earth, but the central point was not destroyed, and it is hidden. Now, I may or may not have found it. You can tell me near the end of this when I kind of show you where I think it is. Scriptures and other books mention that there were four great mountains that were important to Yah, that Yah descends upon. And one was Eden, the other Sinai, and the other, of course, is Mount Zion, the city of David. We already discussed that in the last video on the door. And Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives were right there. All three of those were together. And then what is described is the Mount of the East. For all I know, it could refer to the Mount of Olives, or it could be some other mountain. So we're going to have to get into that. We're also going to try and get some clarity by discussing the four rivers and the idea of Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. So as usual, I like to literally look at the word and the letters of the scripture, because that is how all creation was made. All creation was made by the word of Yahuwah. And so as we study, as usual, we're going to do word studies and letter studies, because that's how I like to approach things. And of course, that is the way we're supposed to approach things. And we're going to do precept upon precept, line upon line, and laws of first mention, etc., the Hebraic way. All right, and so let's just read from Genesis 2 and 10. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted, and became into 4 heads. The name of one is Pishon, the same compasseth the whole land of Halva, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good, and there is bdellium, and the onyx stone. So that is relating to a land where there is a lot of gold and gems, the Pishon. And it encompasses the whole land of a place. The name of the second is Gihon. The same compasseth the whole land of Cush. Now, Cush can mean the land of Cush as relates to Ham, or Ethiopia, which sometimes means the land of Shem. The name also of the third river is Hiddikel, or the Tigress. This goeth towards the east side of Ashur. And the fourth river is Parath, Euphrates. So one of the things we want to remember is the river went out of the garden and then it was parted. Now, some concerns we're going to have with this is around the fact that Cush is in question, because it could be Ethiopia or it could be the land of Cush. And Ethiopia can mean Africa. So we know that the book has been rewritten by other people and things have been changed. And so again, we're just going to explore these questions, because another thing it says is that Hiddikel, or the Tigress River, goes towards the east side of Ashur. Now, also we have north, south, east, and west confused, because the Garden of Eden is, according to Jubilees, in the whole land of Shem. And Eden designates, what we're going to find out, the east. It is the pinpoint of the east. It is not a direction. And so, if this river is going to the east side, but it's called the Tigress, in other words, it's associated with tigers, well, tigers tend to be in the land of India. But India would be the outer edge. If you go into my videos on the lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, I talk about the edge of the east, there being a boundary marker at the Ganges River, that being the end of the eastern realm. So the eastern realm would have been the whole continent of Africa, ending at the Ganges River in India. And India was also part of the land of Shem. And so if you're talking about it being on the east side of Ashur or Assyria, then you have to think about the whole continent of Africa being in the east. And that might kind of make sense with respect to the idea in my videos on the land of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, according to Jubilees, South America being the west and being part of really the land of Ashur. So these directional markers that we understand are very different according to scripture. So we're going to find out that Africa is the east and the south. All right, so but right now I just want you to focus on the fact that the river went out of the garden and then it was parted. Okay? Again, the river went out of the garden and then it was parted. So don't forget to subscribe, like, subscribe, and share, family. All right, so let's look at the word Eden. Now, as usual, we're going to go into all the letters. And for those of you who aren't familiar, I often question the letter Ayin, because it looks like the all-seeing eye. That's basically what it is. And it means to see, watch, know, shade, understand, and insight. The Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet. The Ayin is the 70th letter. And 7 can be associated with heaven, but it can also be associated with the 7 nations and Canaan. And so, even though Ayin might be a good choice, it's frequently used by the current translators of the Bible to indicate an A, whereas the Aleph, being the first letter and representing Yahuwah himself as the strong power leader, and some even suspect it's, rather than a bull, it's actually a ram. I am going to guess in most cases that anytime you're talking about Elohim, anytime you're talking about Eden, for example, it's going to be the Aleph rather than the Ayin. But the other nations use that because that represents Ha-Satan and their God and their father, whereas the Aleph represents Yahuwah. And so again, Ayin is to see, watch, know, shade, understand, and insight. The Aleph is strong powered leader. Much simpler, 3 traits, first value. The door is the Dalet, and this is the door, pathway of life, move, enter in, and hang. And the value is 4, like the 4 corners of the earth, right? Which is where Eden would be, at the center of the 4 corners of the earth. And this means to move or hang something at the entrance. See, it looks like a tent flap. And this is the place where you bow to enter in. You must submit to Yah to access the path and source of life, to move towards it. It's a place that is covered and has something hanging over it. And so it is a covered place with a covering angel with a sword, and it is like the entrance of a woman. It has a covering over it, all right? Because the earth itself is the woman. And so it does have a door, and it is a sacred door. Now the last letter is Nun, which is not unusual. This is a place where the seed comes from, where the waters of life are. And of course, the waters of life come from the Shemaim. There are waters above and waters below. And so the waters in heaven, the Shemaim, are, as I've said before, a combination of fire. It's fire and water. So it's both oil and water. And so this is how the stars were seeded by the Shemaim, the waters of the Shemaim. And so this also relates to the waters of creation and reproduction. And so this is the waters of the seed of Yah. And all of the children of Yah are the seed of Yah. So this is where Nun, the seed, means the seed to continue, the sun and the air. This is where the sun and the air comes from. All right? So that's Israel, that's Yahusha. This is the loins, basically like the loins of the earth, where the seed, all seed, has come out of and was established through. And once again, we're going to talk about the 4 great mountains, the 4 rivers, and Mesopotamia, just there as a reminder. Okay, so the Cave of Treasures. Now we're going to refer to this book as more of a historical book outside of the canon of scripture. However, it is written by somebody called E.A. Wallace Budge, but it was really originated in the 4th century by a priest named Ephraim. And I've mentioned this in my 4 Carpenters video on the Russian chroniclers, on the Russians. And so these are the Russian chroniclers. And of course, that was the land of Ephraim, was in Central Europe, around Germany, close to Russia. So that would have been really, I think it's the kingdom of Dan. And Ephraim's area was around the Black Sea. All right. And so it would be acceptable that in the 4th century, there still could have been a remnant of Ephraim there. And they strongly disliked the Jewish people. Okay, so this is not true Yasharel. This was the people who are now claiming to be are beginning to take on that identity, the Khan and so on. And so the Ephraimites, this was a chronicler who wrote this book, and so this E.A. Wallace Budge sort of published it again and edited it again as the Book of the Cave of Treasures. Some call it the Book of Adam and Eve. And this is the ancient creation story where in paradise we see that Adam and Eve were clothed with glory, shining with praise for 3 hours. So it was when that glory departed from them that they became naked. Now this paradise was situated in a high range of hills, and it was 30 spans according to the measurement of the Spirit, higher than all the mountains, and that surrounded the whole earth. So we know that Eden encompassed the entire earth, and that the whole earth was flooded. And we're going to find out also here that Eden was flooded. Jubilees 2 and 7. On that day, Yahuwah created for them all the seas according to their separate gathering places, all the rivers, and the gatherings of the waters in the mountains, and on all the earth, and all the lakes, and all the dew of the earth. So there's the water. Okay, I put that in red because that was him creating the waters of the earth. And the seed which is sown, and all sprouting things, and fruit-bearing trees, and trees of the wood, and the garden of Eden, in Eden, and all. These 4 great works Yahuwah created on the 3rd day. So that's the seas and the rivers and the waters, etc. And notice the seed is right after the waters because there's a relationship between the two of them. And then all the plants, all the trees and the fruit. Now we have to remember, before the throne of Yahuwah is water and oil, is a sea of glass, a sea of fire. So that's a combination of oil and water, elements that will help us to describe Eden, which of course is the water and the land, the mountains. We are going to see, using words like the garden, plant, mountains, the 4 mountains, the 4 rivers, we are going to see that water and the seed have a relationship. The waters above are the Shemayim, through which the angels were created, and their heavenly chariots, the stars, are above. And man was created in the earth, well, on 3 planes, but physically in the earth and on the earth. And so he is another kind of seed who is equal to sprouting things, fruit-bearing trees, trees of the wood, and of course the Garden of Eden. Eden, nations can be mountains also. And so all these things are related. This is why Yahusha says the kingdom of heaven is within you, because we can look at the things that are created to see that the actual kingdom of heaven is actually in us. We are created in the same way that the earth was created and the heavens were created. So those things were created together at the same time. And when we look to Jubilees chapter 4 and 24, we find out that on account of the sin of mankind, Yahuwah brought the waters of the flood upon all the land of Eden. Now Enoch was actually placed in the Garden of Eden after Yahuwah took him. Why am I saying this? Well, Jubilees 1 and 22 here says that he had testified to the watchers who had sinned with the daughters of men, and he was taken from amongst the children of men, conducted into the Garden of Eden in majesty and honor, and behold, there he writes down the condemnation and judgment of the world and all the wickedness of the children of men. Eden was flooded, all right? But that doesn't mean Eden proper and perfect, the hidden city. Jubilees 4 and 24, on account of, quote, the sin of mankind, Yahuwah brought the waters of the flood upon all the land of Eden, for there Enoch was set as a sign that he should testify against all the children of men that he should recount all the deeds of the generations until the day of condemnation. Eden was flooded, all right? But that doesn't mean Eden proper and perfect, the hidden city, okay? The hidden paradise where the tree of life is. We go back to my previous video because this is an add-on to that on the door to Eden. So we know that he is sitting there in the Garden of Eden, recounting all the sins of men. And so even when we look at the scripture, and it says here in Jubilees 4:24 that Yahuwah brought the waters of the flood upon all the lands of Eden, we know that Enoch is still dwelling there recording sins. So it is a hidden place. And we'll get into that as we look at the Hebrew words for all of this. Because by the word were all things created. So we have to understand the words and letters in order to get a more clarification on the location of the Garden of Eden. But of course, Jubilees 4:26 says that Yahuwah has 4 places on the earth: the Garden of Eden, the Mount of the East, Mount Sinai, where Moses is recording the book of Jubilees, and Mount Zion. So we're going to describe those areas. I'm still unsure of where the Mount of the East is, but you know, I have my ideas and they're ones I've reviewed before, so we're going to survey that again a little bit. And once again, you know, people are trees. We're going to find that Assyria, the Assyrians, are described as a cedar tree, and fallen ones who fell away from Yahuwah, whom he condemned. And the Assyrians are described as pharaohs. So they are Egyptian kings, even though they're descendants of Shem. But the Assyrians are called cedar trees that were planted in the Garden of Eden. So that means symbolically in the land of Shem. And so we read here, behold, Asher was like a cedar in Lebanon with fair branches and a thick shadowing boughs, and shot up very high. His top was among the thick boughs, the waters nourished him, and the deep exalted him with her rivers, running about his plants, and sent out over her rivers unto all the trees of the field. So Assyria was a huge kingdom in the land of Shem, land of Africa. Skipping down, no fir tree was like his branches, and the chestnut trees were not like his boughs. So now we're talking about other trees around, like Israel. We're talking about the other Gentile nations. All the trees in the garden of Elohim were not like unto him in his beauty. I made him fair by the multitude of his branches, so that all the trees of Eden that were in the garden of Elohim envied him. Therefore thus saith Yahuwah Elohim, because he is lifted upon high and has shot up his top among the thick boughs, his heart is lifted up in his height. I have therefore delivered him to the hands of the mightiest among the heathen, and he shall handle him, for I have cast him away for his wickedness, and the strangers have destroyed him, even the terrible nations, and they have left him upon the mountains and in the valleys, and his branches are fallen, his boughs are broken by all the rivers of the land, and all the people of the earth are departed from his shadow and have forsaken him. Upon his ruin shall all the fowls of the heaven remain, and all the beasts of the field shall be upon his branches. So basically, this is a prophecy about the descendants of Shem, who were the Assyrians. Now, I think it's one of Abraham's brothers was an Assyrian, became part of that family of the Hamites. And they were the ones who took the northern kingdom into captivity. They were the ones who became the Assyrian kingdom, worshiping Sanini Nanini, worshiping sin, basically. And they also were the ones who basically settled the 10 tribes in what we know as West Africa today. And they're also in America. They totally sold out to the Hamites to become Egyptian pharaohs, the glory of the excellency of the Chaldeans. And they are described as great cedar trees. To whom art, because remember I said the whole earth was Eden. So even though we're outside of Eden, the land of Shem is the east. It is the most commensurate to Eden as any place on the earth can be in its fallen state. And so it says, whom art thou thus like in glory and in greatness among the trees of Eden? Thou shalt be cast down with the trees of Eden unto the nether places of the earth. So trees are people and nations. All right, and we know a lot of the great mountains on the earth were previously great trees. Please watch my video on Yahusha the great tree. All right, and thou shalt sleep in the midst of the uncircumcised with them that be slain by the sword. This is Pharaoh and all his multitude, saith Yahuwah Elohim. And so they were consigned to being pharaohs. They preferred to worship Ha-Satan and to side with Ham. And of course we have that really very much in South America, where, and you know, the Chaldeans, the Chata nations, you know, in people in New Orleans and stuff, they love to be in all that sin, right? They prefer to worship the serpent, etc. Those are the Chaldeans. And Josephus does talk about them as the Casdim, the Chaldeans, the Assyrians, kind of all the same thing. Arphaxad was one of them, the father of Aram, brother of Kemuel, the father of Aram. Yeah, Abraham's brother Nahor, the brother of Kemuel, the father of Aram. And so he's related to the Chaldeans, the Assyrians. All right, and so they are a people cast down among the Gentiles, uncircumcised, worshiping the Pharaoh, the glory of the excellency of the Chaldeans, and separated from Israel. But I'm mentioning all of this because people, nations can be trees. All right, just so we understand that. Let's keep it moving. We talked about the great deluge that came down from heaven, right? Great deluge that came down upon Eden and destroyed the earth. And the best vantage point to see the Milky Way, the great rift in the sky, and it's no mistake that there's a rift valley also in Africa. The best place to see this great tear in the firmament from the time when the deluge came down is in Namibia. Of course, is on the continent of Africa. This is the best place to view the Milky Way on the planet. So this is also showing us that Africa is that central place where the deluge came down, because what does it say? Yahuwah flooded Eden. So that was the center point that the flood came down on. And it would be the only place that could bear it and be hidden, because it's a divine place. All right, so we're going to get into directions. We're going to get into the letter M again to talk about it as blood, water, chaos, etc. And so directionally, Kadim means east. All right, and so that's why you would have a word like Kasdim with a K instead of a Q. These are the people of the east. These are the Shemites. Shemites are the people of the east. And so the word Kasdim starts with the Kuf, the Q, which means sun, condense, circle, time. So it really is a place where the circle of time is condensed and where time issues out from and collapses and condenses into. It is the source of the circle of life, the golden ratio. This is Eden. All right, and it looks, if we take a look at it, it looks like the place where the serpent entered into the circle of life, the circle of the earth. It is, so we see this break in the circle, right? And it is the place of either the rising or setting of the sun. So in this case, because it is the east, it is the place of the rising of the sun. The place of the rising of the sun. Of course, it takes, the number associated with it is 19. It takes 9 months for a baby to gestate and be born and to become one person. And one is symbolic of the Aleph, which is the first, the leader. And so this is the place of the leader where the baby is born, where the seed comes forth. Okay? And we have D, which is the Dalet, door, pathway of life, the place where you move, enter, or hang. All right? The entrance to a door. This is a place where you bow to enter in. This is the path to the source of life. A place that is covered, has something hanging over it. All right, and so when you look at the male and female reproductive organs, doorways to the male and female reproductive organs, they would have a covering. So the male would be circumcised, the woman would have a covering like a hymen. And so this is the place of the source of life, the door to the source of life. And it is a place of the sun and the light, and a place where a division happened, a dividing of waters. All right? And I already said it's a place where the circle of time begins and ends. And it is the place where the waters of life, power, the blood of life, and chaos comes from. Because mem means water, might, blood, and chaos. So might was the deluge came down to destroy. Blood is the seed that comes out, okay? And water, of course, the waters of life. And it is power, because water is the most powerful force on earth, even more powerful than fire, because it both creates life and destroys, just like fire. All right? And it was the chaos that led to the destruction of the earth. And so these three letters are telling us a lot about the location for QDM. Kadim. I keep saying Kasdim, but I mean Kadim, fam. Sorry about that. The east. And the east is not a direction. It says, the Hebrew word is not eastward, but east. So it says he planted a garden eastward of Eden. No, it was in the east place, the eastern position, location, dot on the map. It was in the east. All right? It's not east of Eden. It's not eastward. It is not a Western concept of north, south, east, and west. Places on the earth, there's a location that is the west, which is North America, and South America, which is part of it is the south as well, because it's actually part of the continent of Africa. Africa is both the east and the south. And then the north is Eastern Europe. And so those are places. They're not directions, because the earth is a plane. All right? And so, once again, this is the Hebrew word to condense, a place of focus or location and point of reference. This is the place where the river divided into four heads of a river. It's the place where the garden is, and it is the east, the mountain of the east. So I just said to you that there are four mountains where Yahuwah comes down and that are important to him, and one was, quote, Sephar, the Mount of the East. So I went into Wikipedia, and it's in a lot of other places, but that's the easiest place you can find it. It is an ancient site located in Yemen, so this reference in Wikipedia says. I don't entirely agree, but it's a place to start. And then Pliny mentions it as Sephar. He's a historian of antiquity of good high regard, okay, Pliny. And its ruins are now known as Dhofar, and it's one of the chief cities of Arabia near the southern coast of Arabia. So there is a Dhofar in Arabia, and there's a Sephar in Arabia. You can see it here, but of course we know that there is also in the Arabic, could also be Darfur, which would be more so on the proper continent of Africa, which we've already talked about. Here, Pliny mentioning it here as being in Arabia. The residence of the king there in Arabia is called Sephar, which is like Sefer or Darfur. When we look at Jasher, it says that Abraham sent all 6 of his sons away, his sons with Keturah the Cushite, who became the Ethiopian people, right? Keturah the Cushite's 6 sons were sent away with gifts. They weren't given formal land. And they went away from his son Isaac to dwell wherever they should find a place. And all these went to the, quote, mountain at the east, and built themselves 6 cities in which they dwelt unto this day. And so we could theorize that that is the Sudan. The Sudan. Or it could be, once again, Arabia, but they got pushed from Yemen into the Sudan, along with Israel when Israel was scattering, as the identity was taken over, right? So once again, we come back to this Abrahamic or Ivrit mountain range in the Nuba Mountains, because they're known to be quite black, the Nubians, right? The Sudanese. And you can see the Sudanese kind of Shemites or descendants of Abraham there, as well as descendants of Israel there in the Sudan area. And of course, I've been over this many times about this Abrahamic range and the Darfur in Nuba. Okay, so this is also the Darfur region in South Sudan. All right, so they have it kind of a little bit to the west, but it would be a little, it seems to have moved, right? When we look at this image. It used to be a little further south, or maybe it's in the same area. It's in the same general vicinity anyway. So I want you to notice, just in terms of the Mount of the East, it could mean the Mount of Olives as well, because we had the city of David, we had the mosque, or rather the Temple of Jerusalem, where the mosque supposedly is in the theoretical Israel today. And then we have all three of these mountains situated around each other. So the Mount of Olives could be considered the Mount of the East as well. Obviously, Jerusalem had its own mountain, and then the citadel of David, the city of David, is Mount Zion. So just to keep that clear, they're positioned right around each other. Mount of Olives could be the Mount of the East, but I suspect it might be that other mountain. Now, another word we're going to look at is the word plant, because what does the scripture tell us? That in Genesis 2:8, Yahuwah Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. So the man is also planted. Why? Because we are trees. So he was also planted in the garden as a good tree, right? In the Garden of Eden. And so when we look at this word, we see that the two letters composing this word are N and T, Nun and Tet. Now again, the 9 is associated with Tet and 14 with Nun. So there's 4 corners of the earth somehow, so all of humankind. And the 9 is 9-month birth kind of thing, right? So cycle of life for the seed to come to fruition, right? All right, let's look at the actual letters, though, their meaning. So we've already said seed, continue, air, and sun. That is what the Nun is. You can see, obviously, what it looks like, right? And then we have the Tet, which is very similar to, sorry if it's cut off a bit, fam, very similar to the ark that Noah went in with his 7 family members, and the basket that Moses was put into. Same association. And it, see how it's divided into 4 rivers. And it means to surround, contain with mud. All right, so when you plant a seed, you obviously protect it. You put earth all around it, just like a baby in a mother's womb, a seed in a womb, correct? And this means to plant, to establish, to be planted and established. And it's 2 letters, N and T, and they add the ata as they're pronounced, not, nata, not. So native, prenatal, nativity, the land of your nativity. So that's where you're getting nat, the land of your planting, of your tree, of your lot. Am I making sense? Okay, so these are all the associations that we can make with this word. And of course, Noah planted a vineyard as soon as he came out of the ark. Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba. And Yahuwah promises through the psalm that Moses wrote upon crossing the Red Sea, the Exodus psalm, that he would plant Israel in the mountain of their inheritance, in the place which Yahuwah has made for them to dwell in the sanctuary that Yahuwah's hands have established. And what did we talk about in the last video on the door to the Garden of Eden? We said that the kingdom is a kingdom not made with human hands, but we saw Yahusha cut out a temple that nobody could see him cutting it out, that he formed with his hands, and wasn't man formed with his own hands. So this is the temple which the hands of Yahuwah himself will establish through Yahusha. All right, so this is a protected and hidden place. Where were we formed? In the secret place. In the secret place. So this is the hidden city. This is the hidden place. So the Garden of Eden has been hidden, and there sits Enoch still, right? And Yahuwah will ordain a place for his people and plant them in it, and they shall be moved no more. All right, so those are all the associations with the word N-A-T or N-T. So let's look at some more of them. When we look at Lake Victoria, which is, you see, here's Lake Victoria, and to the east of it, Lake Natron, which was Sodom and Gomorrah. In Genesis 13, Lot chooses for himself all the plain of Jordan, and he journeys east, and he and Abraham separate themselves one from another. Abraham dwells in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwells in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent towards Sodom, so towards the east. And so this is where Lake Natron is, the only lake I know of on the whole planet that turns people into a pillar of stone. And you can go and see my video on Jerusalem in Africa, which goes into that. And I did it, that same video I did like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, but I've hidden those videos, and that's the kind of compilation of it, because it's a little more succinct. So this is called Lake Natron. So it has the word nat or nt as the prefix. So this is a lake that is in the natal land, the land of the sea. So the Garden of Eden was known to be the black land between two rivers. And of course the Canaanites stole the land of Africa. And Genesis 10, which I keep referring to, which refers to the Mount of the East, it says, and their dwelling was from Mesha as goes unto Sephar. So we've established where Sephar or Darfur could be, the Mount of the East. We've already established that. And now we're looking for Mesha. And when we do a search on Google Maps in Africa for Mesha, there's not a specific place named that, but all of these businesses all around in Tanzania and Kenya and Uganda are all named Mesha. Mesha Steel, Mesha's Home, Mesha Steel Limited, Mesha Secondary School, Mesha Shop. So this is clearly a place that was called Mesha, and I think that refers to Moshe, because you can always change the vowels a little bit and just look at the consonants. And so that's like Moshe. If you put O and E at the end, Moshiach's name or Moses' name may more so be Moshe or Messiah, like Mashiach. Okay? But nonetheless, here we have some identifying words in the region all around it. And I'm going to come back to Mount Sinai in a minute. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is because what we're talking about is a black land that is between two rivers. A black land that is between two rivers. And if Mount Sinai is here, and we're going to survey kind of some of the waterways and mountains around that might give us an indication that Mount Sinai is sort of here. But we're looking for waterways that surround a very fertile land, a black land between two rivers. And we're seeing here already, if we look at this image, we can see that there's literally a spiral that comes out of Lake Victoria and begins to go around. Okay, so that's a clear indicator of something going on, because I'm always talking about the golden ratio, which is like the fetus when it's curled up and life spirals out of it, right? So just remember that Picture that in your mind. Hold on to that image. All right, so let's look at the term garden to get some more associations with the location of the Garden of Eden. And so we just looked at plants. We're now going to look at garden. I took you off on a little divergent path for a second there, but we're returning to word associations with the Garden of Eden. We looked at plant. We're looking at garden now. And so the word garden is ganan in the Hebrew, Strong's 1598. And it's composed of 2 to 3 letters. The root letter, the root word being GN, but truly actually being GNN. We were just looking at the term plant, and now we're looking at the related term garden, both of which are applicable. Now, the Hebrew word for garden is Gimel Nun Nun, Gan or Ganan. Okay, Gan or Ganan. You see it's got 2 N's in it. And of course, the seed is associated with water and blood, with the seed that fertilizes, right? As well as the waters of creation that create life. So it can also be associated with water. And so this is a walk of some waters. And there's a number of words associated with this. I'm going to go over them in a second, but let's just break down this word Hebraically. So it means to hedge about, to protect, to defend, cover, and surround, to gather, secure the seed, to gather, walk, secure power of the seed, to gather, carry, surround, walk to waters. So move to waters, to move to waters. Notice that the word has 2 seeds, 2 waters. All right? And so this can even relate to the northern and southern kingdom, or 2 rivers being divided. And the Arabic word for the same thing, the Aramaic and the Aramaic is Agan. So just an aleph with a G and an N. So this is the leader walking and carrying the seed around. So the leader planting seed everywhere, like in the garden, right? Interesting, right? And so it's the same as in, I can't remember what this language is, VOG. I don't know if it's in the Vulgate or I don't know what that is. Sorry, I forgot. And then in the Arabic, it's I think it's 2 G's. It's GNN. So in the Arabic, it's GNN as well. Okay, but in the Aramaic, it's AGN. And so let's just go over some word associations with some locations. So remember, we have Ghanea. There's a Ghana and a Guyana on either side of the Atlantic Ocean. And remember, those Assyrians got pushed over to that side of the Atlantic Ocean and began to dwell in the West as Westerners as they became like the pharaohs, right? So, and the Gihon River, so G and an N as well, the Gihon River, which is supposed to surround the whole land of Cush. And this is where we get into trouble, because there's a difference between Ethiopia versus Cush, and they're used interchangeably in Scripture. And I think, once again, this is because so often we have Abraham mixing with the Cushites. We had Abraham and Keturah creating their 6 sons, which became the Ethiopians, a combination of Shem and Cush. And so that's, I think Cush and Ethiopian are used interchangeably, but it really means a mix of 2 different people, of Shem and the Cushites, the Ethiopians. And so this is why the land of Africa is called Ethiopian, which is different from Cush. But regardless, we have these words with the same letters in them, the G and the N. I'm sort of ignoring the H and the Y, but it's the G and are very pronounced in Guyana, Gihon, and Ghana. We see also in the word Kisagani, which is a place in the Congo. Let's take a look at that. So when we look up Kisangani, there is a Kisangani right in the middle of where? The Democratic Republic of the Congo. Kisangani. And so when we look at Agan, we actually have an Agan right here where the Nile dumps out. Awash, Awash. This is where the Awash River that comes all the way from Lake Victoria, this is where it dumps out into the Eden Sea. And this is called Agan, Agan. All right, so the leader spreading the seed. The leader spreading the seed. And so what does Agan mean? Again, the leader walking the seed in the waters everywhere. Well, it means crescent and basin. It's actually a phrase used in Song of Solomon where Solomon and the Shunammite are talking about the beauty of one another. I can't remember if this is the male or the female, if this is Solomon or the Shunammite, but it's like the chain of the basin of the crescent. Let not the weather be lacking in the midst of the heap of the thorn, a kind of roses. So this is a very bad translation, but nonetheless, the basin of the crescent is describing a part of the body that's like a basin. All right, and so this is a very sensual poem, which is about the union between Yahuwah and Israel. And so the word used here is the basin of the crescent. And so what does the basin of the crescent refer to? Well, we know as you go back and watch my Door to Eden video just before this one, the basin is used by the priests to wash before they enter into the door of the temple, right? They purify and cleanse themselves there. And it also means pelvis region, pelvic region. And so this is where the seed of the male is housed. In particular, it refers to the fertile crescent of the body, where the male seed comes from, more particularly than the woman's seed, but in particular the male seed. Okay? And so this is where the seed of his loins comes from. So, you know, this is where man was created, right? Remember I talked about how these waters, how oil and water is equivalent to the seed that comes out of man. And of course, the Mediterranean Sea, where the Nile, or what I say that's truly the Jordan River. Go watch the previous video on the Door to Eden. I call the Nile the Jordan River. It was the Greeks who changed it to the Nile. The Aegean Sea is an elongated abatement of the Mediterranean Sea. And so this is a basin that the Jordan pours into to spread more seed of waters, which under the earth could be connected to the Black Sea and all the other seas. So you see how this is a really fundamental water source. A fundamental water source because it's the pelvic basin, the fertile crescent of the body and the earth. And so this is how we can associate it with the word Abyssinia. Abyssinia. It's like the basin of Yah or the abyss of Yah. And we're going to find out that the deepest river on the planet is right here in Africa, in this region. So this is the abyss or the basin of Yah, the crescent basin. Okay, and it's even an oil basin, so or the pelvic floor. So remember, oil and water is what the Shemayim has above it. It is water on fire, which requires that it has oil, and it was how the angels were seated and created. So all of these associations we can make with this word Aegean, like Agan, Aegean Sea. Of course, we talked about the region in the Congo, which has the same word in it, but it has the word Gan in it. Gan. Okay, the GN. Kisangani is in the Congo. So you may be familiar, this is an ancient map. Here's the name here, just screenshot it. And I'll post this on the members site, of course. So this is what you know as Mesopotamia, right? It's the land that is between two rivers, or the Fertile Crescent. But we just talked about the Fertile Crescent, didn't we? We just talked about the place. Eden is supposed to be the Fertile Crescent. Of course, that's what they call the current land of so-called Israel. But this is a sideways version of it. Here is the Jordan, or the so-called Nile River, then splitting off into 7 into the Mediterranean Basin here. And then they say over here, across from here, this is the land between two rivers, between the Tigress and Euphrates River. But I would suggest that this is not the true one. Again, this is kind of the fake one, right? Mesopotamia. So we're going to look at the word Mesopotamia. It is a Greek word, a Greek word. And so the prefix meso comes from the Greek mesos, or middle, or it can even be half, okay? Meso, like Medo. Mesopotamia. Notice how it has ya in it, all right? And it has the mem in it for the waters. It has the T for the tree of life. It has the P for the pay, the mouth. So it is the middle mouth of the tree, or tav, of the waters of Yah. All right? And it is also between two rivers. Land between two rivers and in a crescent usually refers to the Euphrates, like I just said, and the Tigress, the Fertile Crescent. And it's supposed to be in the shape of an arc. Now, that arc word is key, because remember what I said about Eden being like an ark, a hidden place that is protected, where the seed of life, or the source of life, where the deluge came from, is protected in an ark. And so the crescent is also in the shape of an ark, and it's a rich, fertile farmland, and it's in the shape of a flow, and it's supposed to be situated between two rivers. But if it's a crescent that's between two rivers, it would have to be shaped like a U, right? Or a boat. It wouldn't just be between two rivers and a straight line of land between two rivers. It would be a bow of two rivers, all right? And one of the things that is noted about the Fertile Crescent and these two rivers is that silt is brought to the land by one of the rivers. And that is what made the land of the Fertile Crescent so fertile. And it is well known that the White Nile, what they call the White Nile, which would be part of the Jordan River, is fed by, so this is in the South Sudan, and it's supposed to be fed by the Congo River, which brings all this silt into it. And that's why it's called the White Nile, because the silt makes it white. And those are all the minerals that make the land fertile. Now, we already talked in the last video, please go and watch it, on the door to Eden. And the door to Eden talks about the fact that Abraham purchased the cave of Machpelah, which is supposed to be at the location of the door to Eden. All right, and he purchased it from the Amorites who dwelt there. All right, so there are some Canaanites dwelling there. If we look at this ancient Tyrian shekel, now the Tyrians were, Phoenicians. They were a sort of mixed multitude of people, Assyrians, etc., but they were very much known for being the Sidonians as well. And that's the first son of Canaan. And so this is an image of what they looked like. The nose bridge does not separate from the forehead, because the fallen angels tend to have that forehead where the nose bridge does not separate, a very pronounced kind of third eye in the front of the frontal lobe. And there's, of course, the eagle on the back of it. So that's the symbol for the Tyrians. But this is a Tyrian shekel. And also what was known to be on their currency was this image of a tree of life between two mountains. A tree of life between two mountains. And so remember, Abraham purchased the cave of Machpelah. So dwelling between two major mountains is potentially where Eden is. All right? And in this image, there's also this image of, we're not sure what it is. It looks like broken things. I don't know if they're letters. It doesn't look like a script, not sure, but it looks like, could that be the great rift over the tree of life, where the sky cracked open and the deluge poured out between two mountains into Eden, as I showed you in the previous image. So where the sky cracked open and the deluge poured out. Okay, so more clues, more hints about this beautiful land of Eden. It's somewhere between two mountains. And we talked about the four mountains. We're talking about the waterways. These are all, and of course, most importantly, the word, the senses that Yahuwah gave us, because the evidence of him is all around us. So we go according to his instruction as to how to learn and understand these things. That is according to our senses and his instructions and his word. We are now going to look at the word Jordan. The word Jordan, as in Jordan River. It sounds like Yarden as well. Sounds like garden, right? And so we're going to look at this word. Now, of course, as always, it's starting with the ayin. And you know me, family. I always think, well, I think the Canaanites put that on there because they're always putting their father, Hasatan, the all-seeing Agan, on the front of every word they can. But it's the number 70 again, which doesn't really make sense because we're talking about the source of all life. So it's got to start with number 1, which is Aleph Yahuwah, right? And so, and I still like to think of him as a ram. I don't know if that's right or not, but I still like to think he's a ram. So, because he said, I myself will provide the sacrifice, and then a ram showed up. So I do think the Aleph is a ram. But anyway, sidebar. So it's going to start, and then we're always talking about the fact that the Y, there's no J's in Hebrew, so any J is always a Y. So it's either the right hand of Yah or the Aleph, the leader in this word. So it's, you see here, it's something DN. We already talked about the door. We already talked about the C. So it's either the Aleph DN or the right hand Yod DN. All right, and we already know what these all mean. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. So let's talk about these 4 rivers. And again, family, it's a little challenging to define this because they've changed the names and the words so much. So once again, we're going according to the things which are created, which can be seen, which reveal Yahuwah. And so when we look at these 4 rivers, we've got to look at them Hebraically. Hebraically, we look at them. And what I found with a lot of the descriptions of these rivers, and we're going to go into them a little bit, not too much, trying to keep it a little simpler here, but their origins, where they meet up, is completely different information all over the place. So, you know, Satan's the author of confusion. They're hiding something, right? Because the information is so inconsistent. But what we can see when we look here at the Aleph, at the head of Yahusha, the place of the skull, is that when we see this central waterway of Lake Victoria, now we know there's a couple of other major ones here. We're going to touch on that later. But right now we're looking at the eye. You know, the eye could also be, you know, right. There's the third eye, which is in here, which I've already said. I think that's where Eden is. But again, this is one of the central waterways. And what we notice when we look at Lake Victoria is, in fact, as I showed you in the other image, it seems to be a spiral. It seems to be, again, the golden ratio, where, you know, when you can look at the map of the Rubus Negro up at the center of the earth where the indrawing seas are, when you look at that map, it's just like 4 straight rivers that pull all the water in. And that would make sense because they're pulling in all kinds of refuse and garbage and It's being thrown into the abyss to be cleansed and purified and then sent up to heaven and dropped down again. So it would make more sense for those waterways to be more direct. But the difference here is that this is the waterway of life. And so in the same way that the fetus grows, in the same way that all of life comes from this invisible place of the golden ratio, so these four rivers, it would make more sense that they come out in a spiral. Okay? And so we have Lake Victoria, and then spirals around to be this Awash River, which dumps into the Aden Sea, right? Agag dumps, Awa dumps into the Aden Sea. And then we have the Yarden, which goes all the way up to Egypt and dumps again into another abyss, right? Another basin up top here. And we also have a spiraling out connection to the Congo River. And we have another connection to the Zambezi River, okay, which dumps out. Now, you can't directly see these connections, but trust me, they're here, and there's not consistent information on them. And so the Jordan, which goes all the way down to Mozambique, in fact, all the way down to the south, connects with the Zambezi, and it's fed by Lake Victoria. Talks about how the Congo is fed by one of these rivers, and Zambia comes out of some strange marsh in this area, and we know there's a major water area there. All right? So we can just, from this, gather that this is perhaps the source of these four rivers. Now, you could say it's five because this is going in two directions, but really we honestly see 1, 2, 3, 4, and we see a primary one that they're all coming out of and then dumping into the ocean that meets up. So they seem to feed each other, okay? And I want you to notice here with this Awash River that there seems to be currents. If you look and notice, there seems to be pathways and currents that go all the way over to India, which I have told you was also part of the land of Shem. And the border of the end of the so-called east ends at the Ganges River on the other side of India. And so we see this waterway seems to be heading in that way from some of the underground land masses, that it would be directed over there. All right, if that makes sense. And so you can see there's the Zambezi River. And so there is a connection with Lake Malawi. It pours into the Zambezi River, which then pours into the ocean. I like to say perhaps that the Congo River is the Gihon River because it surrounds all of Africa, and it even goes all the way up to the Netherlands, and it goes down around South Africa. So I'm guessing this is the Gihon. Again, it's kind of anybody's guess, the real names of these rivers and their functions, but I'm going to guess. The Gihon River. So let's break this down Hebraically. From the Hebrew, we have the Gemel, which is to walk, gather, carry. And we have the Yod, the giver, the right hand, worship, to work, deliverance. The Hay for look, behold, reveal, and the breath of life, usually symbolizing the angel of Yahua, or most importantly, the Ruach HaKodesh. And the Nun we have as the seed, which we've gone over many times. And so the Gihon River is symbolically and actually and practically the water that surrounds the whole land of true Israel. This is the land and people of the promise who walk around the earth and work deliverance, work hard with their right hand, worship and give and reveal life, watch Yahuwah, and are the sons and heirs of the kingdom of heaven. And these are the waters of life, the living waters, and the people of the brother Yahusha, who is the source of all living water. When we look at this map, we can see very clearly that there is a current that goes all the way around Africa. Now, what you have to do, again, family, you know, reverse Pangea, that's my thing. So Africa, you tuck it back in here, and we see that there's a clear current going out of this region called the Guinea current, so the Gihon current that goes, these are all warm currents, so they're coming from the source, warm currents coming from the source, going all the way around Africa, because remember, Africa's tucked in here, so going all the way around Africa, going all the way up to this region, Norway and all of that. All right. And we have also this Somalian current, which goes all the way around Africa as well. So there's something going all the way around the land of Shem. And even if you look at, we're not going to go into it right now, but if you look at the Danube River, it goes all the way down here and it dumps into the Black Sea. And remember, the Nile dumps into the Mediterranean Sea, which underneath there is connected to the Black Sea. And so if the Danube is coming from here and dumping into the Black Sea, we have a cycle going all the way around Africa. Okay? So that would be like the Gihon Springs. And so here's another picture of those currents. We're seeing something very similar. And again, it's warm. It's warm. So here's an image of the Congo River. And you see that it's supposed to terminate at Lake Tanganyika. But you see it goes further down. Other accounts say that it pours into the waterfall, the Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. It's supposed to drain into Lake Tanganyika. It's supposed to come out of Lake Tanganyika, and then some say it terminates there too. This is all the conflicting information I've gotten. So they're lying, right? But it pours into the ocean as well. You see what I'm saying? And it goes down to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe River is. So it seems like these are all tributaries that go into the Great Jordan River. So like I said, the Congo River is the deepest river on the planet, up to 720 feet deep. So it's got a lot of water running through it. Powerful. Deepest river on the planet. But family, I have to tell you, I was watching a brief summary on the Congo, and they were like, yeah, they dug it. It says they had to dig the river 700 feet. So I'm like, did they dig it or did it dig itself? So it sounds like they were redirecting a lot of waterways, just like they did in the United States. You know, just preparing for the big lie with the Aswan Dam and everything. Just people must have just been like, what are they doing? Of course, the wise would know they were preparing for the big lie and the great deception. And so again, Abyssinia. Here's Abyssinia. It would be the eye here. And see, there are various large pools and rivers here. And remember, Africa was called Ethiopia at one point, Upper Ethiopia. Okay? And we could even break that down into Hebrew. And it is like, you know, the mouth or the face of Yah. And so, family, I just like a fun little cap on, I just want to show you Arvad. Now, what is said, I thought this was kind of funny. I saw this in another video. In Ezekiel 27:11, 2 and 7 is 9:11, right? 9:11. The men of Arvad with thine army were upon thy walls round about, and the Gammadims were in thy towers, and they hang their shields upon thy walls round about. They have made thy beauty perfect. So in other words, these are Canaanites. Let me read this from this Greek historian. In the middle of India, there are black men called pygmies who speak the same language as other inhabitants of the country. They are very short, the tallest being only 2 cubits high, most of them only 1.5, and their hair is very long, going down to their knees and even lower, and their beards are larger than those of any other men. Now, you look at the East Indians and the Canaanites, they have very straight hair and very long beards. Africans can't grow their beards quite that long. Now, when their beards are full grown, they leave off wearing clothes and let the hair of their head fall down far below their knees, while their beards trail to the feet in the front. And their body is thus entirely covered with hair, and they fasten it around them with a girdle, so that serves for them for clothes. So they wear their beards for clothes, all right? So there are, pygmies in Africa, but this is describing some very straight-haired ones. But they're still in the scripture because they're still mixed in with all people. So we have to look at some biblical references for this word, arvad. And so Strong's H7300, it means a refuge for the roving, Arvad, an island city of Palestine. So there is an Arvad off the coast of what they call so-called Israel today. And but when we look at the term Gamadin, it means brave men, warriors, valorous men, Gomed, right? But it also, in the root word, says half cubit. So that's about 20 centimeters high or 9 inches high. All right. And so what other references do we have? Pygmies in the legends, in Jewish literature. Okay, this is an article, Pygmy Legends in Jewish Literature. So the Gamadin translates pygmy as a translation borne out by Aquila, who renders, etc. So this is, I can't read Greek, but modern commentators prefer to regard this perplexing word as a proper name relating to Persia, Lud, and Put. So again, the East Indians, Arvad. So these are Hamites, right? And so we go all the way into this description down here, and it says, the rabbinic tradition, however, has consistently looked upon the Gamadin as a race of dwarfs. Not only does the rendition of Aquila confirm this position, but the united evidence of the Targum and Midrash, as well as the remarks of the most esteemed older commentator of the Old Testament, bear out this view to its fullest. Continuing on. So the Pygmies or the Gamadins are Caphtorites. So the Caphtorites are Hamites of Mitzrayim. They have a relationship to the Egyptians. Okay, so what we have here in the scripture is that it has the sons of Cush, Sheba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, Sabtaka, and the sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan. And Cush begat Nimrod, etc. He becomes a mighty man in the earth, etc., etc. We continue all the way down through his kingdom was Babylon, etc., where he went out to Assyria and went forth further to Assyria and built Nineveh and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah, the same great city. So he built Nineveh, right? And the Assyrians dwelt there. Remember, Jonah had to go and preach to them to repent, right? And one of the cities is called Parusism and Kasluhim and Caphtorim. So the Caphtorim are Hamites, and they are Pygmies. And again, in this article, it says the Gamadin were a Pygmy people of small stature. The word is to be derived from the expression a cubit of length, or cubic of length. Skip down to here. The Gamadin are Pygmy people as explained in Genesis. Rabbah. Caphtorim were dwarfs. So there's the word Caphtorim. This is a city planted by Cush and Nimrod. And so these are the dwarves. Okay? So these are dwarves. Now, Where are they dwelling? Because it says that these people are surrounding Israel. It says they made thy beauty perfect. They were upon the walls round about. The Gamadines were in thy tower, and they hang their shields upon the walls round about. They have made thy beauty perfect. Okay, so these people, see, here's all the images of them, various renditions, are all around surrounding Israel. And so when we look at the Pygmy tribes today, where are they residing? They're residing all around here. This is the Baka tribe, right? Bacchus, right? So these are, hedonistic type names, like Hamitic names. Aka, the Kola, the Mongo Swa, the Kasi, the Twa, right? The Mbuti, the Efe, the Ashwa. So these are all the Pygmy tribes. And where are they surrounding? They're surrounding the pineal gland, which is right slightly, this is where the pineal gland would be, which is at your temple, right? Behind your eye. And so they're totally surrounding today, even today, they're surrounding the Congo. So here's the Pishon River, and it starts with the Pei, then, which is the mouth to blow, to scatter, to edge, the right hand, so the Yod, the Shin, and the Nun. So the Shin is to sharp press. Let's go into it. The mouth open, blow, scatter, edge. And the Pishon is supposed to encompass the whole land of Havilah where there is gold. So the Yod is to give. The Shin is to sharp press, eat the two front teeth with some fangs, or take hold of, right? Seize. And then again, the Nun is for seed. So the Pishon describes an opening or a mouth that scatters and then presses into a tight point, and then the Nun refers to seed. So that means it gives seed. So it's continually dividing. It may indicate that the river is like a mouth opening and closing and finally scattering. And, I said that this could be a wash. It could be the Zambeze. We just don't know for sure. But we do know, like I said, the Rift Valley holds a series of lakes that open and close from the mouth of the source. But you could also say the same thing, about the Jordan or the Zambezi. So, it's your guess is as good as mine. Let me know what you think. Put some comments in the chat and also on the page. I'd like to know what you think. The Euphrates, I would say, could be either the Zambezi or the Awash River. And I say that because they both dump into the Pacific and the Erythraean. And Euphrates kind of has the word Erythrea or in it. So again, this is the basin bowl, the male body part. All right. And so it starts off with the Pei and goes to the Resh and the Ta. And I always see the Ta as the mark, sign, monument, seal, almost the tree of life. And so the Pei is, again, the mouth that blows open to scatter and edge. The Resh is the highest head, first, top, most important person, the power, the fifth. So this is a powerful water moving and pushing from the source of life, the four corners of the earth, which is the Ta, the tree of life, the monument, and the seal. So this is literally the mouth of Yahua pouring out waters of the head waters, the lead waters of the four corners of the earth, the tree of life. All right. So that's what it means. And so this is a very powerful water that can push, I believe, all the way into the Pacific. These things are kind of aligning. This is a sweet water that brings forth a fruit-bearing tree. And this is why we have the Ta in it. And so it is a sweet water, I imagine and see, going throughout the earth and going throughout Africa. Remember, it provides water, if it's Zambeze, to all of the southern part of Africa over into the Atlantic or Ethiopic Sea. And then it also would dump out and push into the Pacific. And so it's providing waters on the right side and the left side, on the east and the west, very powerful and bearing a lot of fruit over the land. And so that's why I would say it's either the Zambezi or the Awash, either one of them. All right, the Awash River. Now, this is like the name Awa, which is Eve's name, which is the wife of Adam, but it also in Hebrew means river of life or the living. And so with the sh at the end, it can mean life taken hold of or squeezed, right? And so we know there's all kinds of dams along the Awash River where it empties out, you know, like I said, into the Aden Bay near Djibouti up here, right? But it is squeezed and open, so there's a number of lakes, like I've said before, along the Awash River. And so it's a really, really beautiful, beautiful river. And so it covers all of these regions, Oromo, Somalia, Ethiopia, and it's contained, it says, within Ethiopia, but there's a lot of kind of dams around there as well. So they kind of choked it, right? They reduced its flow. And so that's what I think has happened over a large part of Africa. As I said before, the Erythraean Sea is where the Awash River spills out into they call this the Aden or the Jordan, right? Or Erythraean Sea is what Herodotus and the Phoenicians called this the Erythraean Sea. The Erythraean Sea. Again, when we think of the Erythrea, again, this is associated with the male basin, the male loins pouring water out, right? Urethra is part of the male organ for delivering waters, okay? And so here's just a map that confirms that. This ancient map, you can find it online, the circumnavigation map of Africa, and you see right here, Erythraean Sea. Okay, and so that is this whole ocean, which is also called the Pishon or Pacific, right? The fish ocean. And why would it be called the Pacific? Look at this big mermaid tail, fish tail that defines the lands of Ham, right? Dagon, their god, right? The whale too, the dragon, right? So it all kind of makes sense. This is why we go according to what Romans said. The things of Yahuwah can be seen in the world around us. The evidence of him is all around us. So we are without excuse not to know him, right? Doesn't that make sense? And so as I've shown you before in this next image here, that you see there seems to be caverns under the water that would also feed this Erythraean or Jordan River moving, or Aswan moving outwards through these underwater caverns into the Arabian or Erythraean Sea and over to the Pacific. All right. And we also have the stream, you know, the Zambezi River, which is also feeding that directional current. You know, it's just occurred to me that, but the Awash could even be called the Jordan, right? Possibly. No, for sure, right? Because I think the land is much larger than that. Again, these are my theories. And so here is the Zambezi River. You see it emptying out, but you see how it comes out of Lake Malawi, and Lake Malawi, you know, also the Gihon empties into it, or they say this is the source of it, right? Like I said, conflicting information. And so here's this Zambezi, and it's supposed to just come out of this place. It says it famously flows over Victoria Falls, and a small spring gurgles within a lush forest, and it may seem humble, but it's actually the origins of a mighty waterway. Okay? It's the fourth longest river in the world. So it journeys to the Indian Ocean from this spring this is a small spring. So I want to, you know, again, kind of review these ancient maps to you, the Amorite Mountains or the Horite Mountains just above this kind of a Nile in Zambia. This would be, where it says that there's some hidden murky forest that the Zambezi River comes out of and that the Congo kind of pours into. We have this huge waterway below these great mountains where the Amorites had their mountains. Remember, I showed you that Amorite coin? I showed you the Canaanite coin between two mountains with the tree of life in it. And here, these are the Amorite mountains. Remember where Abraham could have purchased the cave of Machpelah, right? Or the Horite mountains. This would probably be more west. But nonetheless, we're seeing a very similar picture with these waterways. The Zambezi possibly coming out of here. And we see here the Congo kind of perhaps draining into here, but also continuing over to the Nile, right? Am I right? And so same kind of thing. Here's says Dambia or Zambia, right? And then we see again the same mountain over there in the corner in the DRC, the door to the heads set apart place. And notice how there are two rivers on top of this too. Two lakes on top of, says Fortis Nili. So the fort of the Nile. So the fort of possibly Israel or Eden, right? Either one. So you see they say there is a mountain there. There's a great huge mountain. This is supposed to be close. This river up here is closer to Zaire. But somehow further up the line, it looks like it's lower down because of the perspective, but it would be much further up the continent. They've drawn it this way for a reason, to confuse you. But it seems like there is some great mountain with streams below it. And what does it talk about? How beneath the kingdom of Israel, city of David, etc., there were supposed to be the Gihon springs underneath it. Okay, so are they hiding something? Totally possible. And remember, this is the territory of the Judean kingdom, right here in the center of the Congo. Again, the Zambezi River journeys to the Indian Ocean from this spring. This is a small spring. It's associated with these other lakes. They share the Zambia River. So like I said, the Nile and these other lakes pour into the river as well. And the Malawi River, the Malawi Lake pours into it as well. Like I said, it's sourced near the Congo and it pours into the Indian Ocean. Now, this could be considered Havilah, the region of Havilah. Why? Because Zambia and Zimbabwe have a ton of gold. You go and research gold reserves, they're talking about how much gold Western countries have on reserve, not how much reserves the land holds. But Zambia and Zimbabwe, Zambia has a lot of gems. And so Havilah talks about onyx and stones and so forth. Zambia has a huge gem market, and Zimbabwe has a lot of gold. And so I am guessing that perhaps, because this is encircling a land, that this could be Havilah, the river that circles Havilah, for that reason. And it does encircle it, because these are a lot of waterway circles. But once again, these are also crescents. Now, regarding Namibia, I already mentioned that it is the best place to view the Milky Way because it is a desert. But I mention it also because it is touched by the Zambezi River. The Kobe River splits off from the Zambezi River after Victoria Falls to meet up with the Chubango and the Rio Cavaco lesser rivers, and then streaming, out of the Victoria Falls and into the Ethiopic or Atlantic Ocean. And so some of these rivers touch and feed into Namibia. So I just want you to understand the relationship between viewing the Great Rift and the Zambezi River. The crescent, when we look at, I know this is really foggy, I got this from some other video, But when we look at this area, this would be a fertile crescent. All the way from the eye, like in particular, between the Zambezi River and the Congo River would be a beautiful fertile crescent. And then as well, between the Zambezi and the Jordan or Nile would be another fertile crescent. These are the most fertile places, in fact, on the planet, especially here where this could potentially be Mount Sinai. And we're just going to take a look. We're going to review these maps again. Some ancient maps that show, mountains and waterways in these areas. But yeah, this right here could be a fertile crescent because the water does flow in a crescent. So when we look at this, we see there is a kind of a crescent here. Okay, there's places where this actually goes up here, but this would be like the fertile crescent all around here. And of course, you should know that the DRC has more available farmland than any other country in Africa. So that means than any other country in the world, with an agricultural potential to feed close to 2 billion people. The DR Congo has an estimated 80 million hectares of available arable land, with 10% of this land currently in use. So that's a lot of farmland to be in a fertile crescent. And that's just in the DRC. What about Uganda? What about all these other places? It's going to be millions of miles of fertile land. See the Democratic Republic of Congo, that could be a fertile crescent. Anyway, we know Africa is the most fertile place on the planet. And so we see here, this would be a fertile crescent. And so Victoria Falls is the largest waterfall in the world. And that's part of the Zambezi River in Zambia and Zimbabwe. This is where they intersect. And the Congo River could potentially be pouring into this as well. There's some people enjoying a vacation sitting in the water. All right. This is Victoria Falls National Park. And where do we have the most fighting going on right now in the world? I've talked about this before, but we have to really talk about and expose it over and over again, because it's the reason why they've set the wars off in other places, to distract from this war for Eden, for the kingdom, basically, which kingdom of heaven that suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. Right?
Map of Africa, Central Africa. There are 2 Congos, Congo-Brazzaville and Democratic Republic of the Congo, also known as the DRC. The DRC is the most resource-rich country in the entire world, and for that reason, its people have never known peace. Right now, there's modern-day slavery going on in the Katanga province, which is down here, of the DRC, because the US, UK, France, Israel, China, everybody wants DRC's resources. They want the coltan, they want the cobalt, they want the gold, they want the diamonds, they want everything that's in the DRC. In the eastern part of the DRC as well, they want everything that is in there. They have uprooted everybody who used to live in these communities so that they build mines. And here, in the border with Rwanda, rebels funded by both the governments of the DRC and Rwanda, M23, they are causing destruction, mass essaying women, enslaving children, with the permission of both governments, and of course, under the oversight of the US, the UK, France, Israel, China, and all of them. Speak your outrage. Boycott these companies. Tell them that you know. Tell them that you know that they're using children to mine coltan and to mine cobalt for your electronics. Boycott Apple. Tell them that you know. I'll be sharing more resources and other tangible methods to help. Thank you.
These two little boys, Dorsan and Richard, are 8 and 11 years old, and they have to work in these squalid conditions even in the rain, and they're threatened with beatings if they don't. And this hard work doesn't even guarantee enough money for food. And of course, this is what helpless looks like. He's one of the many children making multi-millions for multinational corporations in America and China while they suffer in squalor. And for this, they'll get maybe 8 pence a day.
When I wake up every morning, I feel terrible knowing I have to come back here again. Everything hurts.
When I'm working here, I'm suffering. My mother, she's already dead, and I have to work all day, and my head hurts me.
And of course, you want to help these children, maybe send them aid. But of course, you know the aid agencies would just take all the money, as they usually do, and capitalize off of and exploit these children anyway. And so I do want to offer some hope. We have to pray for those children, and the only answer is for Israel to return home, to look after these children and their own people, and to get the West out of the Congo. But on a positive note, I also wanted to mention the Nile, because when you look at these pictures of the Nile, it actually looks like a flower or a plant. Remember, we talked about planted. And I want you to notice, family, like what I said before, that this is what a neuron looks like in our brains, in our nervous system, in our heart, in our gut. We have these neurons, okay? And so our lymphatic system even looks like this. And this is what a plant looks like, very similar. Plants have similar veins, etc., because, you know, we are like trees, and plants are made like that, like us. And so there is a kingdom of heaven within us. There is a Garden of Eden within us. Does that make sense? And so what we see here with, you know, what people call the Nile, but I call it the Jordan River, is that it does look like a plant as well. It looks like a flower blooming, right? Even here, this looks like the base of the flower, and then the Mediterranean is the bloom. And so we can see that it could make a pathway all the way up from Lake Victoria to become this blooming flower at the top of the head. And this, essentially, your brain has two kind of holes on it, one at the top, the very top here, and one closer to the frontal lobe. And so this is where the seed is planted in your mind so that you can grow like a tree and manifest your fruit in due season. Okay, so it looks like a lotus flower coming up out of the Nile. So literally, this is where the tree of life could be planted, right? This is where Adam and Eve and the whole human race could have been planted. And this is why there's so much fighting over this land. Now, I, of course, think more appropriately that this Nile may arise more so out of the center of the earth, rather than the eye, the actual third eye. If thine eye be single, please watch my first Eden video on this. But what this also reminds me of is the parasympathetic nervous system. It really represents the spirit and Yahuwah's control over our single eye, and even the parasympathetic nervous system. It is basically a tree of life in the center of the garden that you are, because every single part of our body is the Garden of Eden. And this portion of the nervous system activates to bring us into a state of peace in order for us to experience love. And it slows our heart. It slows down our breathing. It helps us sleep well. It helps us digest our food. It helps us feel connected to other people and gives us creative ideas. It causes peace and love to flow between us and other people. And when the tree of life is thriving, we are well. And consequently, when Israel is back in the land, the whole earth will be well, because we will be, Yah willing, ruling as kings and priests in righteousness by the power of Yahuwah through this second Exodus and return to the land. So please pray for these children, family. Pray for the freedom of true Israel, which is in Africa. Ignore all the smoke screens going on around the world. This should be the center of your focus. This, the flower or the rose of Sharon or the lily that blooms at the center of the earth from the spiral of life, from the tree of life. Assyrian was called the tallest of the cedar trees and was kicked out of Eden, and Yah literally threw them over to the west. Well, they ran there because they wanted to be pharaohs, right? They like to hang out in, India, and they like to hang out in America, being pharaohs. They were cast aside, but they were the great cedar tree, the Assyrian kings, the Kasdim. So why am I saying this? Well, our last river we're going to do here, the breakdown of the Hebrew words with, is Hiddikel. Genesis 2:14 says the name also of the third river is Hiddikel, or the Tigress River. And this goes towards the east side of Ashur. But Assyria, Ashur is very important. And again, my Jubilees, Lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth series is so important to watch, because we learn that Assyria is in two places. It's over in India as well as being in South America. And remember, I mentioned the Assyrian, the great cedar, who was cast down, and this becomes very important, as I just said. And so this is the place where during the Babylonian captivity, Daniel sat down by the great river Hiddikel, as I mentioned in the last video on the door to Eden. And this is where he was taken up and shown a vision of Eden. So it's very significant and important for that reason. Now, Hiddikel is supposed to be a very rapid and exciting rafting journey. Now, in my series on the lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, I talk about the fact that the Danube River could be Hiddikel, but in fact, I'm now leaning towards Hiddikel being the Ganges River. Why do I say that? Well, let's get into the words, and then I'm going to just kind of look at the map with you. So, Hiddikel, like I said, is a rapid river journeying across, many kilometers of untamed river of violent rapids. And so the Ganges has many rapids on it. So you can see here some violent rapids, and also moving through here. And there's a lot of whitewater rafting expeditions. That is on the Ganges. And of course, the Ganges also has the word Ganga in it. It's called the Ganga River, which means spiritual teacher, which is, that's very significant. It's called the Ganga River, the spiritual teacher river. Remember, I told you that's what my grandfather, who's of the tribe of Levi and Judah, was called a Ganga, which means a spiritual teacher. So let's get into the breakdown of the letters. We start off with the value 8, which is Het, which means eternal, eternity. The number 8 signifies eternity. And this is the ladder, wall, protect, inner chamber, gate, separate, H as in Het. Okay, Het, the wall, Wall Street, right, was based on the captivity of Israel. And so this relates to an inner chamber, a gate, a separate, set-apart place. So this is a border. And now if you go and watch my Jubilees, Lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth video when I talk about the east and the lands of Shem as Kadim, again, Kadim, the east. We talk about the meridian of Markur being the outer boundary of India on its, really we call it the western side, but today we think of it as the eastern side. Also connected to it and the Ganges River are the Himalayan mountains. Himalayan mountains. And so we see Hai, which is the same in HY, that's the same letter as Het. And Malian, the Hebrews were known as the waters of the leaders of Yah, as the Malis as well, the Israelites. And so we have Himalayan, set apart Yah's waters of the leaders of Yah's seed. That's what Himalayan means, okay? And so the Himalayan mountains, that's where Noah came down on the ark, and it is literally a wall. It is a wall that divides and sets apart the waters of Yah's rest. If we want to put the S on the end, that would probably be the Samic for rest. And so there's literally a wall of mountains out of which streams this Ganges River. But I'll talk about it later, because the Ganges really, they say it comes from the Himalayas, but it really, I believe, comes from the Black and Caspian Sea. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But it also has the letter D in it. We've already gone over the Dalet, the door, the pathway, the life. So the door is the entrance to the four corners of the earth. So that would be Eden again, and the pathway of life. And of course, the priests are the doors. The Shemites were in the order of Melchizedek. That's who Shem was. And so his offspring were the Dalets, the doors to the upper room, to Eden. They were the priests unto Yah. And of course, the Assyrians fell out in a big way, fell as big cedars on that tip. And we've gone into the Kuf, which is the place where really, in this case, the sun rises from the east, the outer border of the east. And it's also seen as the back of the head as well. And so again, it's a border. We're looking towards the east. So the place of the rising or setting of the sun, we've already gone into that. We've gone into the Dalet. And of course, the Lamed is one of the most important letters. It is the rod of authority, the tongue and staff of teaching. So, family, we know that the Lamed is what the shepherd carries. And the scripture says, Yah's rod and staff comfort us. All right, so these are all the aspects of Shem, the priestly line, the order of Melchizedek, which again, the red cedar, Ashur, fell out of. He fell out of that order and that priesthood and became a pharaohic priest, both in the west and in the east, both in India and in South and Central America. And so again, the Himalayas, Hiddikel, we're showing you these mountains once more. And this is associated with the Tigress River, the Euphrates River. That's supposed to be Mesopotamia. But really, I think that it is the Ganges River, because the Ganges River literally is a river that separates two waters, two bloodlines, two seed lines. Okay? So separates Ham from Shem. And you can watch that in my Shem, Ham, and Japheth series. And so when we consider again the word where it says it's a river of Eden which coursed eastward towards Assyria, the Ganges River courses eastward and southward, south and east. And it's supposed to come down from these Himalaya mountains, which before them is the Black and Caspian Seas, the Black and Caspian Seas. And so the proper name is the Tigress River, and of course we know the Bengal tiger is very popular there. And even if we look at the word Bengal, that means sons of the walking leaders, okay? So again, we have the lamed in that, in the L, and the tiger, of course, this is not the lion, but this is the tiger that's associated with India. And so that also brings us back to the Ganges. And as I said, it's a big rafting river. Now, what I want you to really think about and consider is the fact that the 7 rivers coming out of the White and Blue Nile over there, up there at Egypt, so-called, really I call it the colony of Egypt, because that was the northern kingdom where Ephraim resided and built a high place, or perhaps Solomon set up high places or kingdoms for his Egyptian wife. And so that's really what Egypt is, to my understanding, according to Jubilees. And so also remember, in my other videos on Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the Mediterranean wasn't a sea before. When we read through the book of Jubilees and Jasher, we find out that the gates of Gibraltar were literal gates that Judah sealed shut when they moved away from the land of Canaan to Egypt for their captivity. And so he literally closed those gates somehow of Gibraltar. And so that land wasn't all flooded with water previously. And as I've mentioned, the Tigress and Euphrates River are said to be, sorry, I haven't mentioned this, but the Tigress and Euphrates River are said to be fed by Lake Assad. But it's more likely that it is fed by the Black and Caspian Sea, because Lake Assad is not that big, all right? And so let's take a look at these rivers. I want you to think about the reality that when we look at the Black and Caspian Sea, they do actually feed into these Himalayas, okay? They do feed into the Himalayas, which could then feed into the Ganges. Also, they can both feed into the Tigris River, okay? And why am I saying that? Well, I'm saying that because the Mediterranean wasn't really there before, to my understanding of history. It was created, I think, probably more so when Israel fell. And so this probably, there probably was a basin here, but not this huge sea. And because of the movement of these waters, there's a tremendous amount of water that flows out of the river of Egypt. Because listen, the Amazon River flows 200 miles into the ocean because of its force. Now, the Nile is one of the most powerful and water-filled rivers in the world. And remember, it's fed by the deepest river in the world. The White Nile is fed by the deepest river in the world, which is the Congo River. So you can imagine the force and volume of this water. It's going to go a lot further than 200 miles, all right? A lot further than 200 miles. And my guess is that it goes into the Black and Caspian Seas in underwater streams, and also through rivers, which then go down and feed these other places. That is, my speculation. The Black Sea is supposed to be almost unfathomable. Almost unfathomable. They cannot reach the bottom. And so how is it fed? If these are the greatest waterways on the planet are in Africa, right? If this is really Eden, it could very well be fed by this bloom of the Nile or the Jordan River, the true Eden River, right? And why do I say that? Well, of course, we know the Aswan Dam was created, really, they say, to feed water into Egypt. But why is Egypt so dry? They've got a dam there, and there's always disputes about the dam and the amount of water they're getting. And Egypt, when you watch any videos on it, it's like a desert, because it's almost as though they've strangled the delivery of water. They've strangled it, and they've let the sea overwhelm more so than the fresh water. All right, so I just want you to consider that. They've done a lot of damming and building over of the great waters of Africa in order to what? Hide Israel, hide the Garden of Eden. And so, yes, I want you to just seriously consider that this may be the primary way the waterways are being fed that lead into the Ganges and also lead to the Tigress, so-called Tigress River. Probably that's not what it's called. It's probably a different name, because I think the Ganges is the Tigress, correctly understood. But, again, that's my theory. Please put a comment in the chat and on the leaderboard. Let me know what you think about that. If you can add to it, if you have more evidence, I would really appreciate it. I'd love to get that information. And so, once again, I think that is the true Hiddikel as defined, and defining really the outer boundary of the land of Shem with a wall. It is the set-apart place, the door of the priests, where the sun rises, and these are the leaders and teachers. These are the doors to the priests of Yah. All right? I think that makes sense. And I want to also mention that the golden ratio, the door, if you will, the reason why I talk about, the eye or the actual Nile River being a spiral, like the Taw going and spreading out like a spiral, like the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper is the same kind of thing. It's a spiral in the sky to note where the stars are. And so I say that because, again, this is a golden ratio we're dealing with. And we can also see this golden ratio, can we not, spinning out of the tops of these mountains, which I would say are kind of a clear indicator, or a place where you could potentially hide an Eden, a place of smoke and burning and fire, right? Now, I believe that this is Mount Sinai, here on the cheekbone of Africa, where Moses went out into the desert, but above that is the temple. And the gate would be between the eye and the third eye in the temple. And so that is why I say that these mountains are spiraling out this golden ratio, this center point of energy represented in fire and smoke and steam. And don't we go up in the clouds? So this, to me, is a suggestion of the location of an Eden. The Virunga Mountains and volcanoes sit right here between the Democratic Republic of the Congo, like an ensign, the Taw, both the third eye and the actual eye of Africa. This is where the spiraling smoke and burning, melting mountains, the cauldrons of the Chaldeans, exist, nestled between the Congo and Lake Victoria, and the very high third eye of the temple are 8 burning mountains. The Virunga volcanoes. The Virunga volcanoes are Africa's green and fiery heart. Perhaps nowhere on earth is the dual creative and destructive nature of volcanoes depicting an Eden or hell more evident than in Central Africa's Virunga volcanoes, Mastiff. Mother Nature's most breathtaking masterpieces, straddling 3 landscapes and borders of Rwanda, Uganda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The 8 volcano chain is one of the Earth's most active volcanic regions, and a veritable salad bowl for mountain gorillas, chimpanzees, elephants, and other wildlife. 8 is the number of eternity. Pei has the value 80. This is the mouth that blows, all right? And what do we see coming out of these volcanoes? We see smoke. So the mouth of Yah, that is the word of Yah, the law, the commandments are the key to heaven, as is the breath and the smoke, which is the Ruach HaKodesh, who is also a fire. And of course, the Het is the ladder to heaven. The Het is the ladder, Jacob's ladder to heaven. So that is the perfect value of 8. And so the mouth of Yah and the Het, the ladder to heaven, the set apart place. You know, in conclusion, family, when we look at the word blood, first mention of it is when Abel is murdered and his blood cries out from the earth. And so we have the word dam. So it's D and M. D and M. The blood is a door, it's a gateway. And we know that, of course, the enemies of Yahuwah use it to create portals in the earth to allow evil spirits to enter the earth. They do human sacrifice, right? But it means door, pathway of life to the four corners, move, enter, hang, and then might, power, chaos. We've gone over the 2 of these. So the blood of Yahusha is the true, and it doesn't matter if you know where the Garden of Eden is, because they're still fighting over it, right? Even now, and they're trying to hide their scramble and fight for it right now. But in all truth, you can only enter in through the blood of Yahusha. They can war for it as much as they want. They're not getting in. Just as I said, family, in my previous video on the door to Eden, you are sealed by the blood, by the Holy Spirit, by the name of Yahusha, by the Father, and you will be transported by the angel to the kingdom. So whether that's to Mount Zion, through Mount Zion as the door, or Darfur as the door, or into the kingdom of Eden as the door, it is only by Yahusha and the leading of the Spirit, obedience to Yahuwah, that you will enter. And we can see very clearly the Dalet plus the Mem is 44, and 4 and 4 is 8, and 8 is the symbol of eternity. So that is the entry point to eternity. Or the door and the waters of the Shemaim. All of these equal 8. And of course, you have a smoke and a burning on these mountains. You have the Spirit of Yahuwah in the smoke. And you have the fire that creates the steam. So it's water and fire. Kingdom of heaven is planted within you. And you are a garden of Eden within. And it is through your relationship by the Ruach HaKodesh and the blood of Yahusha that you are cleansed from sin, and you will enter into the kingdom, bowing in obedience and submission to Yahuwah. So I thought I would leave you guys with that. And so to summarize, family, we can understand from all the rivers and waterways and from being planted, right? The kingdom of heaven being within us. And according to Romans, that from the things seen, can we see the things of Yahuwah, understand Yahuwah through creation and through our senses. And we can understand where Eden could be based on the word of Yah, the locations of the rivers and the mountains, right? And what our senses and the image of Yah tells us. Okay? And so I believe that Eden is in this region. And as I have said, we see very clearly that there are waterways underneath mountains and so on. See, they've covered the whole Congo, so we can't really see what's there, right? It's like, you know, they use the clone thing to stamp a bunch of trees over the Congo. The image of the Congo on Google Maps, right? But it's very likely that there is a great river beneath the Congo, or mountain, which hides Eden, Mount Sinai, all of those kinds of places. But definitely the eye of Yahuwah is part of that spiral of life out of which Eden comes. The seed of the Father, the men who are the people who are the great trees. I think they dammed up so much of Africa, they've hidden these things. That's definitely the cheekbone here, though, which would be high, and then this would be the temple, place of the third eye, or the first eye, the single eye. And remember, we went over the fact that the Assyrian was called a great tree. So this gives us an idea from these 4 rivers of where the Garden of Eden is. And the most important thing, family, to know that the entrance to the garden, the door of Eden, is based upon the blood of Yahusha, the blood on your doorposts, because it is blood that creates a gateway. It is the pathway, the door to life. I hope this adds more clarity, maybe some more questions probably, but it gives us a sketch kind of where Eden is. And I think that's really probably as much as we need to know, because the only other way we're going to enter in is at the time of entering in. This is not about knowledge of the mind. This is about a transformation of the heart, mind, and spirit through Yahusha, and that is the true door. Would really love to hear and see the comments, family, so let me know what you think in relation to all of this information. So, shalom, everybody, and thank you again for watching. Thank you so much for your donations. They really bless me, right? So may God bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine on you. May he be gracious with the light of his countenance and give you peace. So just come to intoalltruth.net to learn more about Hebrew Israelite teachings, and go ahead and go to the shop page, and you can get the Moed Appointed Times, or Chai Eat Life and Fast, or you can get a t-shirt. And if you just click through, you'll click through to my Teespring page. Please support the ministry, and you can just support here as well, okay, through a recurring membership. All right, so thank you so much for watching, and go ahead and pick up that calendar or the lifestyle book. Baruch.
Of Yasharah, Yisrael, who love, worship, and praise Yahweh. Give him thanks by saying Hallelujah.